Adobe's adoption of an SDL-like process with with some of the recent zero-day and so on vulnerabilities and exploitation of Adobe. They adopted. I'm not sure exactly when. I know it was calendar 09, and my memory is maybe spring of 09. So you dig yourself out, and it takes time. If you think back, we started doing security pushes in 2002. Our first release of a products that had been through the security pushes in 2003. We still had some big worm attacks in 2003. Didn't get to the SDL until 04. This is not something you do overnight, okay? We know the folks at Adobe. We know their work in the process. We also know that with an existing product base and and a large code base, you don't turn around overnight. That's just the reality. My life would have been more pleasant at Microsoft if you could turn things around overnight too. Yes, there's another question, John.
Yeah, I've actually been to a customer who had about 100 known vulnerabilities after a penetration test.
Mm-hmm.
They did do training, but it seemed they couldn't get management support for actually rolling out an SDL. And their mindset seemed to be, if it ain't exploited, why fix it?
So the question, yeah, I'm going to try to repeat question. So the question, how do you sell something like the SDL to an organization whose mindset is if it ain't exploited, why fix it? If they know about the vulnerabilities, they know they have them. That's a little bit of a head in the sand attitude. Certainly, the organizations that we've seen adopt that we know about are sort of medium or large and or high value assets. There's an element of head in the sand there, and I don't have any magic answer there. I think about the best you can say is, and I've never done this way, find smaller organizations, not the Microsofts, Adobes, but find smaller organizations that have had histories of vulnerabilities being reported and use that as an example of, these are the things we'd like to avoid because it has a reputational impact. But, somebody, people can ignore things if they choose to. That's going to be hard. We couldn't ignore in 2001. Yes, up here. Yeah. What didn't work in Agile? So the original concept in the SDL book was take all the requirements and do all of them every sprint. Okay, and that and that's you can't do that. So that's sort of the that's sort of the quick answer. We also looked at alternatives for sort of the balance between the independence of the sprint. We'll decide each sprint what to do each sprint, and the fact that there are mandatory requirements, and the notion of the bucket requirements, where basically you get to decide what sprint you do them in, but you don't put them off forever, was the key technique to keep that in balance or keep that on check, keep that on track. But the reason I say don't look at the SDL book for Agile is specifically because do every requirement every sprint is just not going to work. Yes, Dennis.
So, since in some ways the analysis of the data that gets produced by this exercise is actually a great measure of how much focus and attention is being placed, right? And I could look at 3 different sets of data and actually see which team even understood the problem, which team was just going through checks or whatever. wouldn't it be a great way to increase the visibility that clients have of the products if there was a requirement, either mandatory or self-promoted, to publish this data? Because if I have to select, if I'm hired to give an opinion on 3 different products, on their security, and I don't have the code, I'm just basically doing an assessment, I would actually find really valuable to have access to this data because I can actually make a very objective comment on what they know of the problem, how much due diligence they did, and the understanding of even the issues of the product that they sell it.
So the question was, shouldn't people publish the data as a way of indicating the quality of the product? That's sort of a snapshot. So there are a lot of factors associated with what that data means. Okay, when in phase do you catch the problems? What's the level of code that's in your product that predates creating the process? What's the productivity of your tools? Other things. We have been working. I've been working actually for almost 6 years now to try to encourage the International Common Criteria Mutual Recognition Agreement to build their process or to update their evaluation process to look at things like the SDL, like secure development processes, rather than just requiring sort of static documentation produced after the fact. And I think there may be a way, something like that to convey something in evaluation reports about what products have done. Very formative set of thoughts. We've gone back and forth with the common criteria folks a lot about what won't work, how it should be done. But I think looking for something like the SDL and whether it's been applied is a good way to do that. I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting, a lot of organizations today are saying, they have an SDL, an SDL-like process. And so a couple of questions that are interesting, do you have an SDL-like process or not? Can I see it? If I can see it, how much of the process is phrased should, might, or ought to, and how much is phrased must, will. Other questions? I want to be mindful. I think this may be the last question. Yes.
If someone came to you and said, where can you pare down your process? Where would you do it? Because like what you're doing is talking from experience from a large company with 1,000 developers, and let's say I'm running a small startup, 5 or 10 developers. It's rather unlikely, let's say, I'd have that box with a privacy review or something, right, for a small company. So where would you cut it if someone asked you to cut your process back? Pare it down.
So I wouldn't cut mine because of the threats I face. People make reputations on trying to find vulnerabilities in our products, and we'd rather they made their reputations some other ways. That said, things I do, I'd probably invest heavily. I do the threat modeling because that gives me an overall perspective on what to focus on. I'd focus pretty heavily on the things that can be automated. Okay, compiler options, automated tools for vulnerability finding, what have you. I'd still keep a final security review just to see what I've done. I'd train. At least, I'd probably do that with CBT, but maybe bring somebody in once a year and train my staff. And I'd certainly have a response process. I think that's almost what simplified says. You ought to look. I'd encourage you to look at the simplified document and see what and just see how that matches up. Okay, I think I'm out of time. I promised Dennis 5 minutes. Am I off now and you on?
Perfect time.
Okay, and I'm going to do.